Okay, so how's everybody doing? Whew, we are finally starting today, and we're taking questions. So if you have any questions or you want to say hi, let me know. I just published the Logic of Preposition To video, part 1. Part 2 will be coming relatively soon, but I have some other pronunciation videos to make as well. So let's see, until we get people in the chat, let's look at some comments if we have anything here. Hello, people are here. Unknown and Gabriel. Nice to see you guys. So hope everything is good. I've been pretty good. I'm a little tired today because I started a new, well, relatively new workout routine based roughly around the One Punch Man workout. So my exercise is definitely done for the day. Let's see here. I don't think we have any big comments recently. There's one thing I can mention, a comment from Steve. But if you guys have questions, feel free to ask. It would also be nice to know how you guys have been over this last week. It's already March of 2021. That's crazy. March. Time flies when you're making videos. I'll paste this here. Is it hot where you live right now? No. I mean, it's San Diego, so in the summer it can get kind of hot, but in the rest of the year, through the rest of the year, in the winter, it's either comfortable or maybe a little cold. It depends on exactly what time we're talking about, but it's still been pretty cold here for the most part. But outside, I mean, the sun is shining, so it's warm outside. Yeah. But of course, we have winter right now, and since Gabriel is in Brazil, I believe, I'm pretty sure if I remember right, summer is down there, and you probably have lots of crazy weather, depending on where you live. But so also, let me know if my mic is good, because I forgot to plug it in before I started the stream, and I don't know if that is causing a problem, just to make sure. But recently, Steve asked in the comments, why does "a" sound like the vowel in "bad" and sometimes "got" in this case? And in this case, he's talking about with the L-colored "a," which would be owl. So like Al, which is a name, pal. I don't know. It's a relatively uncommon combination, but there's quite a few words that use it. And it's an interesting problem. I think that sometimes this can, when you hear "owl," it might kind of sound like "ah," because as the half L, which is normally the dark L, is very close in position to "ah." It's just a little bit up and a little bit forward, roughly. So going from "ah," "ul," "ah," right? "Ah," "ul," "ah," 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 "ul." They sound kind of close. So if you have that problem, just keep in mind that it's not supposed to be "ah," it's going to "ul." But that was a recent question. Um, and I also have, of course, information on what is what in the phonetic guide, English Hacks Phonetic Transcription Guide. Well, actually, yeah, that was a different question. Another good question he asked, which is something I probably need to make a video on. I've got a question too. Okay, cool. I'll go ahead and paste this here from Steve. We'll come back to that, but let's see. I've got a question. Is lithe pronounced, yeah, with voiceless th or voiced th? I see they're both valid on Cambridge Dictionary. Yeah, so the Cambridge Dictionary, because I used that a number of times for various reasons. It was actually one of the dictionaries I used when looking for different entries of the prepositions for the logic book. But I've noticed that their transcription, obviously they use IPA, which is already a problem to start, but their transcription of American English, obviously it doesn't include the cot-caught merger. I've seen some words, I can't remember any off the top of my head, but I've seen some words where I'm just like, yeah, that's not how, like, that doesn't seem like American English to me. So I don't think it's the best resource for American English pronunciation, but it's a good question. So this word, so I said life, right, with a voiceless th. Can you use a voiced th? Yes, yes, you can. Both are perfectly valid here. In general, if you see th at the end of a word, right, this is a general rule. It's a very blanket general statement. There are exceptions. If you see th at the end of a word with no e, no silent e, it's probably going to be. Yeah, I decided to use your questions to get things going until people got here, but they were good questions. But anyway, back to life. In general, if you see th at the end of a word without a silent e, it's most likely going to be voiceless. Okay, and in general, if you see th at the end of a word, it is much, 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 much more common for it to be voiceless than for it to be voiced. There are quite a few words with a voiced th at the end, but when I was looking for examples for the th extra practice lessons, which I still don't think I posted, I recorded those a while ago. I could not find a very long list of voiced th at the end of words. So odds are it's going to be voiceless. The common spelling convention is if you see th with a silent e at the end, it will likely be voiced. Likely be voiced. That is usually generally what happens. But of course, there are exceptions. And in the case of lithe, you can say lithe or lithe. It does not matter. So sometimes you can use both, and either way is fine. Same thing with with, by the way. Even it doesn't have the silent e, but with can be pronounced with voiceless th or with the voiced th. And there's no rule saying you have to use one or the other, but the voiceless is the standard normal one, but we use the voiced one too, especially if the sound after it is voiced. But there's no rule that says you have to. Okay. Unknown also says there's also writhe, but not at the end. Wait, not at the end. What do you mean not at the end? Writhe. Yeah. So writhe, like to writhe in agony, that's a very uncommon, or I don't want to say very uncommon. It's a very advanced word. That is definitely not writhe. That's not a voiceless th. That does not work. Yeah, that's voiced. Writhe, writhe. I'm not sure what you mean by not at the end, but not at the end. Because I was talking about th at the end, and there's a th. I mean, there's the silent e. It's just spelling. So technically, the last sound is th. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but anyway, Gabriel says, "Can you talk about simple past?" Oh God, simple past, yeah, and past perfect. Uh, grammar questions. I mean, th not at the end. Yeah, you mean because there's a letter e there? Because that's the only way that makes sense to me. um, but yeah, as I was saying, if there's a silent e, it's silent, so it doesn't matter. It's just it's spelling. It helps to trigger the voiced one, but there's no guarantee that it will be voiced. Um, can you talk about simple past and past perfect? What's the difference between I took a picture with her and I've taken a picture with her? Well, I've taken a picture with her. That is present perfect, not past perfect. What comes to mind when you hear these two sentences? So first, just to clarify, are we asking about the difference between simple past and past perfect, or simple past and present perfect? Because remember, present perfect is I have done, and past perfect is I had done. So let's clarify that first, and then I'll come back to that. Things. So while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to quickly answer this other question that Steve had from the comments. He said he asked, why does the AH sound, or no, sorry, I already got that one. Yeah, another question. I see some teachers using AA as a way to try to spell, or show um, the sound that I use as AH, right? The A like cat. Many teachers, if they're not using the IPA symbols, they'll write it with two A's, right? And that's supposed to be A. And then he asks, how do I usually spell ah? That's the IPA symbol for ah. Now remember, I speak with the cot merger. Okay, the cot merger. And I talk about that. I'm going to make a whole special lesson really highlighting the cot merger. Even though I talked about it in the main lesson for the fifth vowel ah. The what's merger? Cot merger is where in British English and in General American English, there's ah like down in the bottom middle ah it's sort of underneath that schwa sound and then there's the o, which is farther back and a little farther up, kind of around the start of o. But there's a little bit of lip rounding. Oh, okay. So ah, oh, ah, oh. Me, I speak with the cot merger, and I teach you guys with the cot merger because it's a lot easier. Instead of learning those two sounds, you just have to learn one sound. Okay. And so instead of ah, it gets moved back a little bit, and the oh disappears, right? So it's like it comes down a bit, and the two sounds merge in the back corner. Ah, ah. People who have the cot merger will sometimes unconsciously use ah or aw for words that other speakers use them accordingly, depending on what the word is. But we're not consciously aware of this. This is something that I had to become consciously aware of talking with you guys, and I was like, oh yeah, I do that sometimes. Watching me speak in my videos, in my editing process, all that. But so first, the AW English spelling for most teachers represents aw, the unmerged aw sound, which is like a backwards C in IPA. And because I use the merger, I use AW for the ah sound, okay, because there's just the one. So saw, on, caught, bought, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also walk, where the AL is silent, just like the W is silent in saw. All of these in the way I speak are the same sound. It's just one sound. It's a lot easier for you guys. And you'll still sound perfectly natural and neutral. Okay, most people won't even hear that you're making that change. So what I do is I write. Most teachers will write AH for the unmerged ah, and they'll write AW for the unmerged aw. Right. I write AW for the merged ah, and I write AH for the fourth vowel ah, like cat. And part of the reason I do that, number one, because it's actually a very native thing. A lot of natives, when they're trying to think like, how would I phonetically spell the ah sound? Many of them will write it AH. It's a common native thing. So that's one point. It's sort of in our subconscious. But number two, writing AA for the phonetic spelling in English, I think is misleading because it makes many learners think that it's a long sound. And you know what I think about long and short. It exists linguistically, but I don't think it's a useful concept in English because it conflicts with how English stress works. Okay, it's very confusing for many learners, and they get the wrong idea about how sound works in English. So I don't like writing AA for the phonetic spelling of ah because it's misleading. So if that was confusing, let me know, and I'll try to summarize all those points. But okay, going back down. So Einstein's. I'm not gonna try to say that. Carvajal ow, my jaw. Carvajal Arroyo. There we go. What was up with my jaw? That was weird. Okay. Sorry it took me a second, but yes, he says, I've got a question as well. How do you say hold up? Well, that was a very enunciated version, so that's one way. I've heard both hold up and hold up. Yeah. Good question. So this question is a very, very, very good question because it is directly related to what I call the dynamic range and flow. Well, dynamic range and quality and flow. I had to add flow because, yeah, but it's quality too. So it's a long title. I need to come up with a different title for it. But the dynamic range and quality and flow of American English speech, real American English speech, okay? Not what it's supposed to be according to proper enunciation, because enunciation, the full pronunciation of words, is generally a tool that we use. It is not the normal way we speak. We use it when we need to. So hold up, this is a very good example. If I were to very clearly say both of these words, we're going to say whole. So there's going to be an H with an L colored O. H, O, not O, O. Whole. You could do a full L, it's okay. It's not wrong, but we're likely to do that dark L, half L sound. I call it the half L. Whole. And we have the D. Hold. D, okay, light D. Hold. That's clearly fully enunciated. And then we have up, which the up is a schwa. And then if I push out that P to clearly enunciate it, up, little p, up, hold up. The D is going to connect, hold up, and it becomes kind of flapped because that's what it does when it connects. Hold up, hold up, hold up. Okay. Now, that's if I very clearly enunciate the word. That's probably the least common way to say it because we don't normally fully enunciate the word. It can come out that way, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It's perfectly fine. It's just relatively unlikely. And if you always speak that way, you're going to start sounding more like a robot, a little more unnatural. So what is going to happen here, this particular combination is kind of special, these two particular words. So you say that you've heard hold up, which I don't know if we're actually dropping the L there, but hold up. Yeah, I guess we could say it that way. Or hole up, where there's like the D disappears. And we can actually connect the L and said hold up. Okay. Yes. Especially that second one. It's common. I do think in this particular case, because we don't normally randomly drop the D at the end of a word. Maybe if it's ND at the end, it's kind of common to drop the D because the N, and it doesn't always happen, but that's kind of the time where we tend to drop a D, if at all. But in this case, this is like perfect for the D to connect. And so this is a special case in this word or phrasal verb, hold up, where we could actually drop the D, and that does sound a little more informal. If I say, hold up a second, hold up a second. Especially if you watch a channel called, I think it's called Girlfriend Reviews or something like that. It's a gamer channel. She says that a lot, like, hold up a minute. um, the first one, like, hold up, hold up, hold up, hold up. That one sounds kind of slangy to me. Like it definitely sounds even more informal. And I don't think that's necessarily like a standard way to say it, but it's probably very common. It sounds more informal than hole up, where you drop the D instead of the L. So yeah, sometimes when we don't use the full enunciation, sometimes, not definitely not all the time, sometimes it creates a more informal sounding version. And over time, it might become more of like a standard acceptable variation. Um, but this is a special case where both of these do sound a bit more informal than hold up. Hold up. Yeah. Very good question. Very good question. Okay, and let's see. Gabriel says I messed up the tenses. Sorry about that. Okay, well that still doesn't confirm which one you were talking about. I assume because since you said I've taken, I assume you mean present perfect. So I'll talk about present perfect and simple past. So I took a picture with her. I've taken a picture with her. So we're going to use these two as examples. And correct me if I'm wrong. No problem. You're very welcome. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gabriel, if you wanted the past perfect, but I'll talk about the present perfect. So I took a picture with her, simple past. I have taken a picture with her, present perfect. We're going to talk about this in a couple ways. Okay, I'll come to that question in a second. We're gonna simple past and present perfect. Okay, good. We're going to talk about this in a couple ways. We're going to talk about, because you asked me, what was it? What comes to mind when you hear these two sentences? So I'm going to talk about sort of my impression as a native and sort of kind of how it feels a bit. And then I have a special way that I've developed to teach the difference between the simple past and the present perfect. I'm sure it's not unique. There are probably other teachers who use it, but I haven't seen anybody else use it because I don't pay much attention, or I don't pay much attention to other teachers. That's probably why. But we'll look at that after. So first, I took a picture with her. That is a point in the past, right? It's from the perspective of a native. It's something that's done. It's not connected with the present. We use the present perfect, of course, to connect something that happened in the past with the present, and that can have a couple different meanings. Like experience, I've been to Japan. That doesn't mean I'm still in Japan. That means that I've had the experience, and that experience continues, for my whole life. It's up until now, and when I die, then my life is over, and the whole thing, moves into the past. Whatever. So, I took a picture with her as just a simple statement. Okay, it happened. Yesterday, last year, whatever. I've taken a picture with her. There's a British use of this that Americans don't really use, which is recency. One of the uses of the present perfect is recency, so something that has recently happened. That doesn't look right, but I don't know how else I would spell recency. Something that is recent, right? And this use Americans don't tend to use because we'll just use the simple past with something like just, like I just did it, instead of I have just done it. Sometimes we'll use both of them, but usually we like to use the simple past instead. So, and that's a whole point of the difference in use of the perfect tenses between American English and British English. I'm going to be having lessons on that at some point in the future. But this sentence could sound kind of British, and I've taken a picture with her. That sounds like very recently. Like, say you take the picture with her and then you go to your friend and say, oh, I've taken the picture with her. An American would, well, depends on how we're thinking about it. An American might say that in that context. but we're equally likely to say, I took a picture with her, even though it's very recent and the meaning doesn't change, okay, in American English. So it's a very difficult point when talking about the present perfect in American English, because when possible, we like to use the simple past, but that doesn't mean we won't use the present perfect. As for the exact meaning here, I took a picture with her, I've taken a picture with her. They could mean the same thing, depending on the context, like I said. But I took a picture with her, I've taken a picture with her. There's a slight difference in feeling where I took a picture with her, it feels like it's done. As I said, it's a statement of the past, it's done. Where I've taken a picture with her, I've taken a picture with her. That could be potentially something like recently happened, less likely in American English. In this context, it does work. Or it could be like you have the experience of taking a picture with her. Like I've been to Japan, I've taken a picture with her. So there's like, I've taken a picture with her before, like at some point in the past, but we don't have to say before. So like, oh, have you ever taken a picture with her? Yes, I've taken a picture with her 3 times, whatever. Okay. And so we can use that to talk about that experience that is connected to the present, or something that has happened a number of times, starting from one point in the past up until the present. The main difference, again, the meaning doesn't really change here in American English, at least. But the main difference is that where the past perfect feels like it's just an isolated point, and the present perfect will feel more like it's not an isolated point. There's some continuance and connection with the present. That's why it's called the present perfect. Now, I don't remember the original drawing that I made. I don't remember where I wrote it down, but I'll try to do it here. If we have the simple past, okay, so we're going to say past. Hopefully you guys can see this. I don't know where my pen is. I have to use a pencil. Past, present, future. Okay, and we're right here. So, right, when I say the sentence, obviously I'm in the present because I'm saying it right now. And I say, okay, I took a picture with her. So I'm just pointing to that point in the past, right? So we're pointing back. Oops, dropped my pencil. So I'm pointing back. I'm talking about a point in the past. It's done. Okay. And in English, right, the thing about tenses in languages is that it's really something you have to feel to really get it, because there's a different languages have slightly different perspectives of how time shifts, especially in languages that have perfect tenses, because not all languages have perfect tenses. So if we're talking about the present perfect, different line here, we're going to say this is point in the past, okay, but it is connected, oh my god, with the present. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. So we have, here's the past still, so the point in the past, right? I'm here in the present, and I'm saying, okay, I've taken a picture with her. Now, this point in the past could be a long time ago, if you're talking about like you have the experience of doing it. It could be potentially recent. Again, depending on the context, Americans probably wouldn't use that. We would just say simple past with just or something like that. Or, maybe if you did it 3 times, if you took a picture with her 3 times, so there maybe this is 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, and then now we're in the present, you're looking back at all of these times, and you say, I have done that, but it's connected with the present. This is not the way I described it before. I forgot the way I explained it. So I'm going to have to try to find my original illustration, because it was so amazing. I don't have to teach this point very often these days, which is lucky for me. But anyway, does that help? I hope that makes sense. I know that's kind of rambling. I'll definitely try to find my original drawing that I made, because that'll probably remind me of the way I explained it before. And yeah, I just never formalized that that approach. Okay, so I'll move on. If you want more clarification, you have more questions, feel free to ask. There's no stupid questions, right? This is a very difficult point, so just let me know. But Unknown says, Josh, I asked this before, I know, but I find the transition for dates so hard, like 20th of February, 10th of March. I've been working on it for like months, but it'll come out as T always. Okay, so well, we have two types here. So you have just the TH, right? And then you have the NTH. I remember the NTH can change it a little bit. We have a different way we say it. You could do the regular dental or the dental T or D variation without the N, of course. But so this again, this is part of the natural, the dynamic range, flow, and quality of sounds. If you're having trouble with it and it's coming out as a T, then I would look at your TH, like just in isolation, just your TH sound. How well can you make a TH sound by itself? Okay, nothing before it, nothing after it, just a nice good. Okay, both voiced and voiceless. It's easier to have a position that isn't quite right with the voiceless one, and it'll still sound okay. But when you add the voice, you really have to make sure that you're getting it well enough, like really close enough, because otherwise the voice is going to make it obvious that you're not making the right sound. And one thing that I notice a lot of English learners have trouble with, even if they can do a TH, they can't hold it. And that tells me that you don't have mastery of the sound, because I can say it here all day. Okay, I can hold it and hold it, hold it. It doesn't matter. You need to be able to do that. Okay, because if you don't, and you sound more like the okay, you're letting your tongue move. You don't have that right position. Now that's for a good clear enunciated th, which you should be able to do. The dental one, of course, is where you go flat and pull it off. So that's depending on if it's voiced or voiceless. So that's easier, but again, there are cases like other where we have to pull back into that where we don't really do that because we have to pull back and we're not going to go all the way forward. So when you say 20th of February, so 20th, that's a voiceless th. Make sure first you could do the th by itself. And I see David is here. Hello, David. Thank you for joining us. We're just in the middle of answering questions as always. Make sure you can do the th by itself. Okay, voiced and voiceless. And make sure that you can hold it. Okay, that's something that you should practice if you can't do that. That's going to be your base. Okay, once you can do that, then you want to say, okay, 20th, 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 and go straight into that th. Maybe hold it for a second, just to get the practice, right? 20th. Okay. Then we have the of, right? So you can maybe take off the 20th, or the 20th part, and just that connection. Thov, th, right? It's like the, but voiceless. Th, thov, thov. We usually drop the on of, so you can just ignore that and just say the. Okay, once you can do that, put them together. 20th, 20th, 20th of February. 20th of February. So that's how you isolate the problem, right? If the th is the problem, get that first, then put it back in from front, back, and then the whole thing as a flow. You piece it together, right? You pick out the pieces, you zoom in for what you need, practice those, you zoom back out, try to put the pieces back together. That's how you improve your pronunciation. When it comes to something like the 10th of March, okay, so we have that N. We're very likely to just do a dental T here because it's a voiceless TH again. 10th, 10th, okay. 10th, 10th, the. You can do a regular TH, that's fine. 10th, 10th, that's fine. 10th, 10th, 20th, 10th. It's going to sound pretty much exactly the same. You just have to make sure you can transition from the N to the TH. And it does help to still do a dental N there, even if you're going to do a clear TH, because it's just easier to move instead of here to here, it's easier to move from here to here. But in this particular case, of course, you could do the dental TH or the dental T, ten the, the, and that's fine, right? If you want to do it that way. With 20th March or 20th of February, 20th of February, you can again do a dental T. But if you want to do that nice clear TH, which you should be able to do, make sure you can do the TH by itself first and then try to put it into these combinations, okay? Now, if you've already done that and you still have a problem, then we need to look closer at what's going on. I get natives feedback about my TH and they say it sounds natural. It just, when it's at the end. Okay. So this is something that can happen. This is why in my lessons for the consonants, I give examples at the start of a word, in the middle of a word, and at the end of a word, because this is a real thing. Okay, when you're learning the pronunciation of a language, you might be able to say the sound perfectly in isolation. You might be able to say it perfectly in words, except in one position. Okay, and so all that means is you need extra practice at the end. There's something going on in your mouth or with your brain, right, which you can fix. You can rewire it. It's not the end of the world. But you have something going on with mechanics of your speech that are causing you to have trouble with TH at the end. So what do? Well, you practice that. And I know it sounds very simple. I'm just saying, just practice it. Again, there might be ways that we can go in and look at the real problem and what's going on there. But I would try to take a bunch of words with TH at the end. Maybe you've already done this. Take a bunch of words with TH at the end. Make sure that you, again, build the pieces. Okay, build the pieces. So do the TH by itself to start, right? When you sit down, you practice. You have the word 20th, for example, right? Or with, simple word, with. And you do that TH. Okay, sounds good, fine. And you get native feedback. They say it sounds good. Okay, fine. So you know that it should sound fine. Okay, so you do that first, and then you bring in not we, and you say if. Can you go from to the th and still have a good sounding th? If not, you have a transition problem going from whatever particular sounds into that th position. And if this is a common problem in many words that end with th, then that means you just have a general transition problem of getting into the th when there's something before it. Going into it and finding it with nothing before it is okay. You can make the sound fine. But as you're flowing between sounds, you have this problem. So you need to isolate that transition, and you need to use many different combinations. You have, right, teeth, with, Beth, bath. You know, you go through all the vowels, so you get nice range, always going back into that th. And just practice that transition, making sure that you're hitting the right spot. You're not going too high, you're not going too low, you're not going too far back, whatever it is, and you're still saying a nice, good th sound, regardless of where you're approaching it from. That's the practice you need. I would be very surprised if you tell me right now that you've already done that, because then I really don't know what the problem is, and I would actually have to talk to you and like we'd have to analyze it in person, because I can't really think of any other ideas why you would be having the problem. So yeah, that's that. Follow up if you want. I don't know if you have any other questions, comments about it. We can come back to that for sure, but we have some other stuff to talk about. I got a question about cot merger. Do you use only the sound in cot, or you mix the two sounds? I'm confused. Okay, I know what you mean. This is a good question. I'm confused because I think that the sound in cot, it's a fusion of the sound O and ah, or O and ah from my language. I don't know if the Portuguese, Spanish, probably the same. Yeah, so there might be some minor differences. I'm pretty sure that Spanish is just a subset of sounds in Portuguese, and Portuguese has more sounds. I'm going to look up the Portuguese vowel chart here really quick just to confirm. Wikipedia, Portuguese Portuguese vowel chart. European Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. There we go. Oh yeah, and of course, I'm pretty sure you're from Brazil. I just assume because I've worked with Brazilians. If you're from Europe, the chart I think is a little bit different. So I'm looking at the Brazilian one right now. Yeah, so you have the start of A in English. You have quite a few sounds. Half of them, of course, nasal. So that adds a little bit. But you have a few other sounds as well. Now, according to this, in Brazilian Portuguese, you actually have the general American, not the Western American, but like the sort of middle of the country general American, and the British, ah and ah. So you have, according to this chart, it looks like pretty much the same positions. You have the unmerged two sounds in Portuguese. Okay. Now, if you want to just use that, you have to remember which words use which. Okay. That's part of the problem that English learners face is when you have these two sounds, you have to remember, okay, this word uses this one, this word uses this one. And so the AW spelling is commonly aw, but there are exceptions, right? And so if you say an AW word with aw when it's supposed to be ah, you're going to sound weird. So again, that's another reason why I just teach you the cot merger, because you don't have to worry about which words use which. Okay. But you do have the exact two same sounds in Portuguese if you're Brazilian, according to the vowel chart, and in pretty much the exact same position. When we talk about the cot merger, so this is a good clarifying point. What basically happens is the aw sound, the backward C with a little bit of a lip motion to it, aw, which I probably can't do very well consciously because it's not part of how I speak. But that sound is that sound disappears. Okay. And for most words, because as we talked about before, there's or and oi, which actually get replaced by the start of o instead of o. So that's a special case. But for just regular monophthong sounds where there's and ah, the ah disappears. Okay, so you can think of it as like it sort of moves down. So we're taking the backness, how far back the sound is, we're taking that from ah, right? The ah sound. Because in the cot merger, the sound is back here, using the back of the tongue. In the unmerged, the not merged ah, okay, that sound is farther forward using the middle of the tongue. So we take the same IPA symbol and we shift it back, and this sound up here disappears. So basically we go here and here, but we just use the one symbol, okay? And this this merged ah sound sounds generally extremely close to the unmerged ah sound. In fact, I never noticed anybody making ah until just a few months ago, actually, when people really started asking me about it. My brain really started to pick up the signals, and now everywhere, like if somebody uses the unmerged version, I will hear it, where before I never heard it before, ever. So that just goes to show, even after a lifetime of my brain adapting and compensating based on my dialect, with very little effort, I have managed to acquire the ability to clearly hear the difference between the two sounds in the flow of natural speech. So, I do need to clarify though, it's not a mixture. Okay, we're not mixing ah and aw as like now it's a new sound. All we're doing is we're removing one sound and we're shifting the other one back. And it's of course it's going to sound a little bit different because now we're using the back of the tongue instead of the front of the tongue. But to an English speaker's ears, there's going to be very little, if any, difference. Like our brains kind of filter it out, and we don't really notice any difference between the two. So yeah, it's not a mix or a blend of two sounds. It's just a replacement and a deletion, or a moving of one and a deletion of the other. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And also, you had some more here. When something just happened and you're going to say something about it. Okay, so back to the present perfect simple past. Okay, when something just happened and you're going to say something about it, would you use present perfect or simple past? Or wait, oh, present perfect or simple present perfect or simple present? You mean simple past or simple present? Because if it just happened, oh, see, okay, there's the basics of tenses, right? The basics of tenses. So like the simple past is used for things that are generally true or things that are habitual. Like I am tall, that's a generally true statement. It's a fact. Or I wake up every morning at 6. So that's something that habitually happens. So I use the simple present. But the simple present, for example, can be used to talk about the future. It can be used sometimes it creates a certain feel if we use it in the past, right? Like the year is 1999 and many people are traveling around the world. Okay, I'm using the simple present. It's called the narrative. I think it's called like the narrative present or something like that, where I'm describing something that's in the past using the present tense, and it gives it a different feeling, right? We can do that in English. It's a special case. It doesn't just replace the normal simple past, but it's something that we can use the simple present for. So when we're asking about, oh, would you use this in this case or would you use that in that case? Those are good questions, but there's not always an easy answer. It depends on the context. It really depends on the context. So if something just happened, I would need more context to really dig my brain into that. Because I could say like, I saw her a minute ago, or I just saw her. Okay, I could say, um, this is a case that I just gave, right? Like I saw her a minute ago. A British person would say, I've just seen her. I've just seen her. Americans are very unlikely to say that. That sounds like a very British use of the present perfect. Um, we would just say, I just saw her, right? Um, or I saw her a minute ago. Um, but the simple present, I see her a minute ago. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it's kind of weird. So if you meant the present simple, it would definitely be the present perfect, if anything, there, not the present simple. Um, but if it were the simple past versus the present perfect, either one could potentially work. It depends on the context. Sometimes it's going to sound more British if you use the present perfect. Again, that's a whole topic. It's a very complicated thing of how Americans actually use the perfect tenses. And it does not neatly match what you learn in grammar books. Okay, it's a very difficult point that I really hate teaching. It's like the hardest thing that I've ever had to try to teach, in like anything. The perfect tenses in English are just, they're a nightmare. Um, Learning the basic rules it's not that hard, but learning how people actually use it in reality. The perfect tenses is one of the few points where British English is so much easier. So much easier because they tend to actually follow the rules, like the proper grammatical English rules, where American English, it's not that we're not following the rules. We're not following the rules according to British English, according to the original use of the perfect tenses, but there's an American use which is perfectly grammatical in American English. It's not informal necessarily. Um, that is different. And this is actually a very interesting point because I've talked to people from Brazil, I've talked to people from various Latin American countries, um, and I've noticed that Canadian English and American English, as well as Latin American Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese. So the Americas. I don't know about French. I don't know enough about French to include Canadian French in this. I know it's different than regular French from France. But for English, Spanish, and Portuguese in the Americas, generally speaking, the perfect tenses are used less and the simple tenses are preferred. Doesn't mean they're never used, they're just used relatively less compared to European Portuguese, European Spanish, and European English. Okay. Um, those tend to follow the traditional present perfect, past perfect rules. And it's an interesting shift. It's like all of the Americas sort of went towards more of the simple, where the European kept the traditional perfect uses. It's a very interesting thing. But anyway, do children also struggle in acquiring the TH? So sorry, David, it took me a second to get here. I've read they might make the same substitutions as some ESL students. Do they use dental TH, or are they flat out using a DF, voice to voiceless? That's a good question. It's a very good question. I've talked a bit about the R in the live stream and how that's something that some speakers struggle with. It's a natural developmental thing for the R to replace it with a W, and then later the R is acquired. Usually, some people don't, but most people do. The TH, I think, is also one of those. I think it's generally acquired before the R, because the R, I think, is usually the last sound. I'm not an expert on all the like linguistic studies and all that stuff, but based on what I remember from my own research and my own personal experience as a native. Yeah. So, like, for example, brother is like the perfect word. Depending on if the R has been acquired or not, and depending on if the TH has been acquired or not. So if neither have been acquired, you will hear very, very young children say "wada, wada." So there's a W for the R consonant. There's just an like a British for the vowel. And then the TH will become a D or a T, exactly like you said. So wada, wada. If they have acquired the TH, then they'll add that bwatha, the, and you still have the R problem. And then, of course, the R is acquired later. So, yes, and that's a very interesting thing is that in terms of pronunciation, well, I mean, pronunciation is, I think, it doesn't tend to be emphasized in classes, and so I think the data is somewhat limited there. But we do have evidence that for both pronunciation and grammar, ESL learners, non-native learners of English, tend to follow very similar patterns of when they acquire what. And so there seems to be a particular order that English kind of fits into the brain over time. And when you start mastering certain things, which is another reason why like the articles and preposition usage, you'll still make mistakes with those usually until the advanced level. Like there's still advanced speakers who, will still make some mistakes with those. Looking at another language in Spanish, for example, the difference, so Spanish has two verbs for to be, ser and estar. And then, of course, there was another one. Oh, yeah, there's two prepositions, por and para. And these two things, ser and estar and por and para, are two of the biggest problems for non-native Spanish learners, particularly if they have an English background. If you have a Romance language background, it's usually not that bad because they're similar, but coming from an English learning background, it's a very common problem, and those things tend to get acquired later in your Spanish learning process. So all languages have their certain difficult points that over time the brain kind of adapts to, but it takes longer for certain things. Part of my interest in languages and part of my job, I think, that I've taken on is to try to find if possible, the hacks and the like using the logic of prepositions to build a feeling for the language, instead of memorizing the rules and doing a bunch of like brute force practice. I mean, you still need a lot of practice either way, but I'm trying to make it a bit faster, a bit easier, solve some of the big problems that are common problems for English learners and things like that. So I think that there are definitely ways to do that and make things easier, but it takes some unconventional thinking on the teacher's part. But anyway, Teachers here in Brazil. So Gabriel says, teachers here in Brazil run away whenever you whenever you make a question about the present perfect. I know. Yeah, I know how to use it when it talks about experiences, things that happened in the past, and still connected to the present. I see present. Yeah, it's easier to understand when it has the been. Yeah, so the present perfect form of be. Exactly. Yeah. So, and I know why they run away from it because they probably don't have those answers. Like they probably make mistakes as well. You know, if they're native speaking teachers, then no. But if they're like native Portuguese speakers from Brazil who are English teachers, I can almost guarantee that they do not properly use the present perfect versus the simple past. Like maybe they do it a lot of the time, but I've talked to a couple Brazilian Portuguese speakers who are English teachers, and they don't have that mastered either. That's one of the hard points. Now that doesn't mean oh, you shouldn't trust your teacher or they're not useful or anything. Non-native teachers can be very, very, very valuable, but it kind of depends on obviously if they don't have it, it's kind of hard for them to teach it, and they usually just go off what the textbook says. So they give you the textbook information because the textbook is there, that's what it says, and then when you ask them a question, well, go to the textbook. It has the answer, right? When, of course, it doesn't actually have the answer. Give me 1 second. I have to use the restroom really quick. Oh, so, Devin says, by the way, coming back to the hold up question, finally I get here, yeah. I've also noticed it in old, yes, which often comes out like old, um, old school. It sounds like old school, yeah. Yeah, so that might be part of the reason why hold up can drop the D. Just because something has ol in it doesn't mean you can drop the sound after it. However, relatively speaking, there are some words like old. Old is probably the best example. There might be a couple others, but that's definitely true where we just drop the D. And I think part of that is because old is a pretty common word. Um, and even if it's not old school, right? Old school, you can do the D. That's fine. But if I say like, I don't know, old uh, pizza. I don't know, if pizza that has been in the fridge for too long. I could say old pizza. You want to throw out this old pizza, right? Now it's a little more likely to do the D in that case, but you don't have to. So old is another word where you can do that, and there probably are some other OL words that end in D that you can also do that. It depends, but that doesn't generally apply to the language as a whole necessarily. Like I can say bathroom perfectly and not bath another word. Oh, back to this problem, yeah. Sorry. Okay, so if you're having this problem, which I guess I'll read your next comment here as well. I've actually done it by shadowing. I still avoid using a th ending word on calls and use another word if I have the synonym, yeah, of it, or not use it at all if I don't. Wait, what? Oh yeah, if I don't, I mean I don't have a synonym. Yeah. Okay, so yes, and you say you've actually done it by shadowing, and that's perfect, right? So um, you've managed to get bathroom, and that's good. So you've gotten used to going from a to th to bathroom, bathroom, bathroom. Okay. Now, if you do bath in another word, you have a problem. Okay, well, what does that mean? That means you got to practice more combinations. That's all it is. So you have the ath. Now you say like, okay, bath is, or bath. I don't know. On, like turn the bath on, meaning the faucet. We can use bath with that meaning turn the faucet on. So bath on, bath on, whatever it is. You do different combinations. And that's just what you have to do. Of course, with the shadowing, it helps and stuff, but you got to practice. Whenever you have problems with a particular sound, you might have problems from all angles, like approaching it. And so you just have to practice a bunch of different combinations to truly master that sound in the flow of speech. Because it's one thing to say, okay, if I put my tongue here and I make this sound, it comes out well. It's a completely different thing to be moving, 100 miles an hour or even 50 miles an hour through word after word after word after word and still be able to hit the sounds, right? That's a second step to it, where you have to actually put it into the flow of speech, and that's where the shadowing comes in. So you're on the right track. Just keep practicing more combinations. Okay, Stevie, I'm Brazilian. Good. I get it. Thanks. Simple present. Oh no, I'm crazy. Simple past. Okay, so you meant simple past. Good. Yeah. YJ. Sorry, it took me a moment here. L and R in the middle of words. Oh, sorry, my brain just completely skipped over that. L and R in the middle of words are difficult to distinguish. Play, pray, glass, grass, fly, fry. They can be for sure, yes. And we have some follow-up here. YJ, are you from an Asian country? Yes, from Japan. Sugoi. Or as they always say in anime, suge. I like how they do that. Anyway, yeah, if you don't know, I've been interested in Japan pretty much my entire life. And yeah, ちょっと日本語がわかります. I don't speak it very well. I haven't spoken it in a long time. But I know how to read hiragana and katakana, basically, more or less, kind of. So, particularly for Asian speakers, I'm glad Gabriel mentioned that, because they could be hard for anybody, but especially for Asian speakers, and particularly for Japanese speakers, I know very well, the difference between L and R is a very common problem. And in the case of Japanese, the reason is because Japanese technically doesn't have an L. And technically speaking, you also don't have an R, although in Romaji, we write it with an R. But the Japanese R sound is commonly described as like a combination between D and L in a way. And it's like weird. It's very similar, I think, to like the single tapped R in Spanish or in some other languages. It's not quite the same, but it's similar. So yeah, we know this is a problem. Actually, I need to add this to the list. I have it in the back of my mind because I know this is a problem, but I haven't actually added it to the list. I probably should. I need to open my LibreOffice writer. Use Microsoft Word. I am going to be making one or more minimal pair practice lessons for this problem. Whether it's LR by itself or, as you said, in the middle of words, that's particularly difficult to distinguish. And at the end of the day, when it comes to your ears, you really just have to target the pairs and practice hearing the difference. Okay, we know this works. When it comes to your mouth, right, being able to produce the difference, you have to play with the sounds, right? You have to make sure you can do an L good, an good, which is a problem for everybody pretty much. And then make sure that you can say pl, right? That combination, play, pray, purr, right? So the tongue isn't coming up to l. It's pray, glass. And also practicing with your mouth and reinforcing, okay, the L is here, the R is here, and getting used to that difference in your mouth, that will actually help to reinforce your ears. It actually changes the perception of what your ears are doing, because now you have some experience in your brain. You're starting to rewire your brain on how to use your mouth, And of course, that's actually going to be an influence on your ears. That doesn't mean you don't have to train your ears at all. Depends on the person. If you have talent, I mean, you might be able to get away with it, but it's usually the combination of these two where you're playing with the sounds and you're doing minimal pairs, trying to hear the difference between sounds, that they sort of combine and they help each other. And that gives you the best overall result. So I will make videos for that, or at least a video for that. In the future, I'm going to add it to my list for right now. And I'm going to use your exact words. I will make this a relatively soon. I'm not going to add it to the end of the list. I'm going to add it higher up in the list, but I have many, many things on my list. Why are you, there we go. Play, pray, grass, or glass, grass, fly, fry. Okay. Okay, so stay tuned for that. But Steve, I think you might understand. Wait, what? Why are all these slashes here? What? Oh, okay, I think you might understand. Owned to you. Okay, so owned to you. I don't know why we're adding the E. I would make that E silent, but one to you. One to you. I know what you're doing. You were trying to reduce things, I think. One to ya. One to ya. One cha. One cha. Okay, see, so now you're adding this E. Okay, the first thing, this is a very important point. Owned does not have an E sound. Okay, remember, usually the ED ending, in 99% of cases, the E is silent. Okay, the only times, there are a couple special exceptions, but the very general rule that will almost always apply is that the only time you say the E, which it gets pronounced as I, the second vowel sound on the chart, like it, okay? The only time that you're going to say that E sound, and it's not silent, is when there is a T sound or a D sound before it, okay? And in American English, those would both turn into flapped Ds. So, for example, weighted, that T in weight turns into a flap D because that's part of the American sound. The only exception to this where it's not a T or D, in terms of if it is supposed to be a T or D, like wanted, we have the NT plus vowel connection rule, which can sometimes apply inside of words. And so actually we very commonly do this. We'll keep the id from the tid part, right, where we're supposed to actually pronounce the E as I, but we'll drop the T and we'll connect the N. So we actually have two rules being applied at the same time, and it sounds like wanted. Okay, wanted. That would be a stop D, but whatever. Wanted. Okay, so that's a special case. Again, there are a couple random words that don't end with T or D where you do say that ED ending, but generally the ED ending for past tense, if it doesn't end in a T or a D, it is the E is going to be silent, 100% silent. Okay, so that's the first point I want to mention. I know, but I forgot it when I was writing. Okay, good. I think this E means it. I think this E means it, like own it. Yeah, so, well, I think I know why you said that. So yeah, because as I'm trying to pronounce that E, now it's starting to sound like I like own it to you, right? Because I'm adding that extra sound. So let's ignore that E there. So it'd be owned to you. That would be the clearly enunciated way, right? Owned to you, which would be like owned to you. Oops, actually, those one to you. It'd be kind of like this, right? O-N-D, owned. Spelled O-W, but it's not ow, right? It's O, it's just the O sound. Owned to you. Okay, so that's how it would sound fully enunciated. Owned to you. We're not reducing to, we're not reducing you. But of course, to commonly reduces, you commonly reduces, ta and ya. So you're not just going to drop that D in owned because the T is there, okay? We're not going to do that. In fact, if anything, the T in the preposition to is probably the the single weakest T in the entire language. It's a very, very special case because to is just a little grammar word, right? It's just a preposition. It's extremely common. And it commonly gets reduced already to ta instead of to, right? And so that T is actually very, very, very susceptible. Sometimes it turns into a D, sometimes it disappears, sometimes it stays as a T. Sometimes it turns in maybe into a, oh, actually, does that work? Hold on. I'm thinking of a different rule. Yeah, there's things that can happen. Like if I say go to, okay, it's very common to say go to. So we reduce to ta, and then the voice of O changes the T into a flat D. Go to. This is a very special case. Very special case. Go to. Anyway, so owned you. Now that sounds a little weird. Sounds a little weird, right? Owned it to you. Okay. In this particular case, for whatever reason, it's actually kind of weird. I don't know why, but we're actually going to say the T and the D. Owned to you. Owned you. Owned you. Owned you. Okay. Yeah, we can't do that. Owned you. It's owned you. We're going to draw out the end of the word a little bit. This is a weird case. This is a very, very weird case. But anyway, yeah, so the T is basically going to disappear. We'll keep the D. Or you can separate them. In this particular combination of owned, the word owned plus to, it's relatively common for us to actually separate them to make them clear, but it depends. Okay. Owned to you. It's owned to you. I guess we could use the T here as well. That actually doesn't sound too bad. So T or D. This is a very, very strange case. Owned to you, or owned to you, owned to ya, owned to ya, owned to ya, owned to ya, owned to ya. That's owned to ya. That's starting to get a little much. Owned cha, owned cha. No. So we're not going to connect the T and the T and the ya. We're not going to erase and ta and start blending the t and the ya. That can happen in some very special, very informal cases. Like if I say, what are you doing? The question, the very informal way to say this is to just drop are. So instead of saying what are, connecting that what are you doing or what are you doing, we'll say like whatcha or even what you. My thing is good here. It's like whatcha, what you. So there are times where we'll remove something to connect a T to an IA, but that will, I think all those cases are very, very informal. So yeah, with this combination, you can say a T or a D at the end. You can reduce to ta, you to ya. So the farthest that will go is like own to ya or own to ya. Nothing farther than that. And if somebody ever does say it more like that, then I don't know, I would be surprised. It starts sounding strange to me. Okay, name written in Arabic, I think. Sorry, it took me a while. Hello, how are you? I'm fine. How are you? How to pronounce counterpart? There's a few different ways. Again, we have to talk about the actual dynamic range and flow of English speech. So the fully enunciated version of the word, counterpart. Okay? Counterpart. So we have a T in the middle, counterpart. We have a T at the end, counterpart. Okay. However, that T at the end is most likely going to be stopped, potentially dropped, depending, but counterpart. Okay, stop T. Then the T in the middle with counter, it might stay, but it's very likely that we're also going to drop that T because, again, we have NT plus vowel. The vowel is in this case. And so we'll say counter. So the T just completely disappears. So the most common way, so that gives us three ways, right? Counterpart, fully enunciated, counterpart, counterpart. Okay. Technically, you could keep the T and the second T and drop the first T and say counterpart. That's another way it might come out. So it gives us four possible ways to say it, but there's only one most likely way, which is without the T's. Well, without the first T and a stop second T. So counterpart, stop T, counterpart. And I didn't mark which one is higher. Counterpart. It should be the first one. Cow. It would be the primary stress. Verify that because I used to have a big problem with English stress when I was younger. So, with my ears anyway. Counterpart. Yeah, primary stress on count. Anyway, now if you go to the dictionary and you look at that, you're going to see the T in the middle, you're going to see the T at the end, and you're going to think that the proper way to say it, that how you have to say it, is counterpart. And that is absolutely not true. That is actually the least likely way to say it because that is the fully enunciated word where we're not dropping or changing anything. In English, generally speaking, it depends on the length of the word. If it's a super short word like on, there's usually not going to be a lot of variation, but it's more the rule than the exception that whatever the dictionary says, there's probably going to be something a little different in actual speech. And I know that's frustrating and that sounds very complicated in English, but it's not that bad, trust me. But this is again why you need to focus on your ears and actually hearing what is being said and what is being pronounced instead of trying to memorize a bunch of rules. Okay, because the rules, some rules can be useful, but most rules will not help you very much to actually speak or hear the language itself, how it's actually spoken. So I hope that answers your question. I don't know what to call you, Arabic person, I guess. If you're not Arabic, I apologize, but it looks like Arabic writing. So, David, how do you pronounce these car brands? You already asked me this. You asked me this like 3 weeks ago. I mean, it's okay. You can ask me the same question. I don't know if maybe you don't remember, but there are more people here now, so or different people maybe, or maybe you're just checking to see if I pronounce them the same. Okay, as I did last time. Yeah. So we have how I would probably most naturally say these is Renault, Puget, or yeah, Puget. I'd probably say Puget. I really don't know how to say that. We might say it a couple different ways because it's a really weird word, but Puget, Volvo. So it's all Volvo. Some people say Volvo, and it's okay too. Most Americans will say, I'm not sure what most Americans say. I hear a lot Hyundai instead of Hyundai, like it's supposed to be. So I usually say Hyundai, sedan, and Mercedes. Those last two are actually really, really easy, sedan and Mercedes. But the other ones are a little weird. Renault, I don't know if some people might say Renault or something, but Renault, that also that seems pretty standard to me. Volvo has two pronunciations, Hyundai has two pronunciations. And then Puget, I really don't know how people would try to say that. That's how I say it. I've actually never heard of that car brand. I don't know who makes that. So unknown. Okay, I'll try to look from a broad perspective from that. Okay, good. Going back to the shadowing and the th sound. Steve, I know, but I forget when we already covered that. Okay, yay, we're almost caught up now. I hope I didn't skip anything. Let's see. Despondency. What's good? Josh finally got on. By the way, people just say counter. Well, most people most commonly would probably say counter with no T. The T is the T is supposed to be there, right? The full pronunciation of a word is possible. It's always possible. It could just come out that way. But when we have certain rules, like the NT plus vowel, which doesn't always work inside words, but it's still pretty common. When we have rules like this, it's less likely that we're going to use the full pronunciation as it looks. And do you mean people just say counter instead of like counterpart? Or are you talking about counter as in like they say it with a T? Because we were talking about counterpart, I want to make sure. But okay, moving on. Oh yes, and I'm good. Hope you're good as well. Meadow, thank you for joining us. Hey Josh, I find it difficult to get the words pattern party correct. Okay, yeah. Okay, good. Yes, I helped. You're very welcome. I don't want to call you Arabic person because it might be offensive. But person with a seemingly Arabic written name. We'll say that. That should be fine. You're welcome. Okay, so pattern and party. Yeah, this is a problem. In one case, we have a flapped D before an and in another case, we have a flapped D after an sound. Of course, the second one is R. It's an R-colored fifth vowel, but there's still the R part to it. And this is a common combination no matter how you look at it, but especially in the first one, that usually seems to be more difficult. So remember, first, in American English, T's like this, it's not because it's written with two T's. That's just spelling, okay? Ignore that. Whenever you see two of the same consonant, it does not make it longer. It does not change anything. It's just spelling. It's a very common spelling when you have a stop sound, t, d, p, b, k, k, in the middle of a word. Not all words do it, but it's very common that you'll see two of the same letter, except with K, where it's usually written CK instead, because C can also represent the K sound. I know, English is stupid, whatever. But pattern. For that American sound, okay, here we have a weak T at the start of a syllable, unstressed syllable, right, between two vowels. That triggers the flapped D in American English, even if it's written with a T. It doesn't matter. Okay, so it's not pattern, it's pattern, where you flap it. So you have to go from that flap, and then you tap and pull into I've talked about this before. Pattern, pattern. It takes practice. You got to make sure you can flap the D. You got to make sure you can do the and then you have a good solid And then going from the flap D to the is actually a little bit different than the normal flap D, but it's the same basic idea where you're just kind of trying to tap at the top and then you go into the next sound, but you have to pull into that if you do your with a retroflex instead of a bunch like I do, it can be, I think, a little more difficult. I don't really do the retroflex R, so I'm not sure how to describe that. But there you go. So always make sure you have the pieces first, right? Each piece, and then practice that particular transition for things that you have difficulty with. Okay, that's how you master the pronunciation. With party, we have the reverse situation. So here we have R, which is a vowel. It's an R-colored vowel. And then we have E spelled with a Y, but it's the first vowel E, party, right? Party. And we have a T at the start of an unstressed syllable. So it's a weak T between two vowels. Again, we're going to flap it. But now we have to go from R to flap into E. So we have to flap and go forward. Ri, R, R, So I'm really just like tap, push forward, tap, push forward. That could be another very difficult combination, and you need to practice that. Now, unfortunately, the hardest part about the flap D when it comes to practicing the flap D is in speech, in real speech, it's never in isolation. It's always between the two vowels at the start of an unstressed syllable. There's probably a couple exceptions to that, but anyway, that doesn't matter. The point is that it's never in isolation. Okay, it's never in isolation. So even me trying to say like da for a flap D, it's really awkward. It's really strange. I've done it enough times now where I can kind of do it pretty easily, but it's probably not like the perfect flap D. It's pretty close because we don't use it in isolation. Okay, so you have to get it in the flow, and that can be extremely difficult. But you just got to do it in a bunch of different combinations. Okay, so I would make sure that you can do the regular flap D. Like if you say, remember when T or D connects to a vowel at the start of the next word, we also do a flap D. So you can say like what about, whata, and just get that nice little easy flap D, right? If you can do that, then you work into these more difficult combinations like adder or arty, right? Um, and depending on if you're going something up here like E or something back here like we are going to sort of slightly modify the way we do the flap D, but it's going to be based around the same area, more or less. Might be a little farther back. Um, but the idea is the same. You're going to do a light tap and then move into the next sound. You just have to get used to how do you actually tap and make sure that you're tapping well enough and not getting it like closed where you say like par D, right? That's not a flap, that's just a D. Um, so it takes practice. Can you answer this again? I forgot your explanation, Lowell. And a lot of lo-fi videos on YouTube. Yeah, I remember that from last time. That was such a horrible explanation. Apparently, I didn't explain it very well. If you don't remember it, yeah, this was a hard one to talk about. Okay. So I use the example of dance, right? Like music to dance to, which is like music that you can dance to. So it's you're getting basically in line, right? To is an endpoint, and we're saying, okay, what kind of music? Because some music just makes you sad. You don't want to dance, right? So it's music that you can be sad to, right? So the to sort of points to the type of music that will bring that effect in line. So if it's music that makes you want to move and dance, right? Then it's music you can dance to. So like along with the rhythm, right? You go to like into that flow of the music. I think that's better than how I described it last time. It's the same idea here. So the first two, remember, is beats to sleep or beats to chill. That's like music to dance to. So ignore the first two. Um, but the second two, again, it's bringing it in line. So there's beats, right? Because it's lo-fi, so beats, right? Dun, dun, dun. I don't know beats, but you know what beats are. And then if the effect of these beats, you know, this type of music, is that it will help you fall asleep or it will help you relax and chill out, right? Then it's those type of beats that are in line with that effect, right? So it points to that effect or that outcome. Um, and you sort of get into, there's two ways to look at it. You can get into those beats, right? Into that music that will cause that effect. Or maybe it can get into you, but it's kind of reverse. So, um, yeah, I explained that a lot better than last time. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, ask me to clarify. Another question from Einstein's. What about there's yeah, good question. I was waiting for somebody to ask this. I don't think anybody's asked this yet. Um, you've probably actually heard me use it several times today because it happens. Yes, it is common. It happens all the time. I've also heard a doctor saying there was plus plural. Yeah. I want to identify whether this is fluency or an informal friendly pronunciation. This is such a fantastic question, and I haven't made a lesson on it yet because I've been so focused on pronunciation. But this is another thing that I think you guys are really, really going to like. So it's not just this. There's other details. The nature of grammar in a language. All right, let's zoom out for a second. The nature of grammar in a language is that it changes over time, right? It changes over time, which is why people who are what we call in English grammar Nazis, where they say like, "Oh, hey, you know that's wrong grammar," and you know they try to teach native speakers how they should speak instead of just letting people speak because like I don't correct natives, you know. Generally if I'm joking around with a friend, whatever, you know, I might, but I don't correct natives because a native is a native. They know how to speak. You know, if they're not well educated, then maybe they don't know, you know, fancy ways to speak or whatever, but that's fine. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, you know. When you're learning English, okay, one thing that you have to, or any language, one thing that you have to keep in mind grammar changes over time. And so there are always, in any language, there are always, which I guess I'm making a very broad statement here, but I know for sure in English there are several things like this that are happening right now. But I'll just say generally in the languages, there are always certain details of the grammar that are in transition, right? Most of the grammar of the language will be pretty stable, right? Maybe there'll be some informal things, there'll be some formal things, whatever. Um, but there's a couple points here or there that are going to be in transition. And what I mean by transition is things that were previously wrong, right? They're grammatically incorrect. They're just like people don't say that at all, like formally or informally. Usually it starts as some informal usage. And then over time, say several generations, okay, we're not just talking about like 10 years or something, we're talking about like maybe 50 to 100 years. That creeps up into just the natural way, not a formal way of speech necessarily, but the natural way that people speak. Okay. And there's certain details that are changing. This is one of those details. Okay. This is one of those details. It's very, very important. So whether it's present or past, okay, because this doesn't really affect the other tenses very much. So theirs is there is, and if it's plural, right? If I say there are people, we're supposed to say there are people, right? You can contract there and are and say there were, but it's are, right? Or if it's past, well, there was people. There were people. See, it even confused me for a second. There were people, okay? Because were would be the plural, right? Now that's how it should be according to grammar. This is something that has been changing for quite a while. My grandma speaks this way. Okay, so it's been around for quite a while. Um, it if you point it out to a native, especially if they're educated, they will say, "Oh yeah, that's right." And there are probably quite a few natives who are completely aware that some people speak without the R and they say is instead or was instead. Um, and they look at it as maybe a little more informal or just wrong or whatever it is. Again, the whole native speaking population of a language will be at different points depending, but this is something that has been around for a while and it's becoming more and more and more and more common over the decades. Um, and so what's happening here, it's actually very interesting because it lines up perfectly with what I tell you guys about trying to feel a language. Um, what is happening in this particular case is there's a little shift, there's a subconscious shift that has been happening in English, at least in American English, um, where we're starting to perceive this combination of there is something or there was something um, as the contraction. Well, in the present tense, it would be the contraction theirs, and then by extension, there was, because there are reasons for that, don't worry. We'll just say theirs for now, the present tense. We're starting to perceive theirs as a self-contained unit. So it's still there is. We know that it's there is. But especially if it's contracted, it's starting to feel more like that's the one word instead of it being two words, right? And it's like its own little concept that is sufficient in itself without the actual like there are separation. It's just theirs, right? And we will still sometimes use there are, there were. It is still technically correct to do that, but this is so common that I would not say it's informal. It's a normal part of how many people speak. I would even say how most people speak, including me. I'm an English teacher and I use it all the time, all the time. I wasn't aware of it until a few years ago, but I've noticed that I use it all the time. I sometimes use the other one as well, the actual plural, there are, there were. But I've noticed I use it myself as well. So, and if you heard a doctor saying it, I mean, what more proof do you need? It's becoming a very natural part of the language. So this is something that's changing. So it's something that is technically incorrect. Some people will tell you you're wrong, but the majority of people will speak this way, even in more formal situations. Okay, this is real language, real English. I don't care what your textbook tells you. I don't care what a grammar reference tells you. I don't care what the dictionary tells you. This is the language, and this is something that is changing. Another one, which I won't go into detail, is the subjunctive of to be, right? Because we say, I ate yesterday, right? I ate yesterday. That's simple past. If I ate, I would tell you. That's the subjunctive past, which is a completely different thing, but it looks like the simple past. Okay, if I ate, it's hypothetical. With to be is the only one that hasn't completely changed, right? It's simple past. I was, you were, he, she, it was, we were, they were. But in this subjunctive past, if I were, not was, if you were, if he, she, it were, if we were, if they were. Now, because that's all were, but the simple past is much more common than the subjunctive past. What's happening, you'll hear a lot of native English speakers say, if I was, or if he was. And it's actually starting to mirror the simple past because all other verbs have already made that change. Back in Shakespeare's time, Shakespeare spoke modern English, the same English that I'm speaking. Okay. Obviously, things have changed. He didn't speak Middle English, he spoke modern English. And so many things have changed over the last, 500 years? And things are continuing to change. And one of the things that have changed is that this form, if I ate, if I saw, if I went, it looks like the simple past. And now to be is the last piece that is finally starting to mirror what looks like the simple past. Okay. That's also a very natural part of speaking. It's something that is changing. And in another 100 years, it'll be the correct way to speak. That's just how it is. So, yeah. I hope that answers your question. I know it's very in depth, but yes, use it. Okay, there's many people. Use it. Okay, there might be a couple combinations here or there where it sounds kind of like extra informal. Sounds maybe a little bit weird. I've noticed that on very rare occasion, but 99% of the time, it's just how we speak. So I wouldn't worry about it at all. Because we'll still tend to use it in those cases anyway, and then we're like, wait, that sounds weird. Oh well. It's as I said, it's still technically in process of changing. Okay, hi, I was curious to see if you changed your mind about some of them. I guess you were trying to trick me for the car question. Yeah. By the way, in words like garage or mirage, do you use je or j? Either one is fine. It doesn't matter. There are two variations. I think I tend to use je more commonly, probably because it's a little lazier, right? Going up into the d and then doing je, which is j, takes half an extra, moment, a little more effort. American English is very lazy. So garage, fine. Garage, fine. Mirage, fine. Mirage, fine. I do think that the je version is probably more common, but it doesn't really matter. Just don't say garagey or miragey because those are wrong. I mean counter with the T, writing ZZZ, you're right, it's like counter, yeah. So, again, the T could be in counter, but very commonly we're going to drop it. It's going to be the most common way to say it. Got a lot to ask about. Well, yeah, I see that already. Sorry, I'm getting to things. It's just like Thursday marathon, right? That's what we should call this. It's not question and answer. It's Thursday marathon of me trying to answer questions um, and failing miserably. I'm again. So unknown says I'm again bringing up a weird feature of mine, but F it, yeah. I thought you were gonna say if it, and I was like, wait, that doesn't fit. Okay, so you're using F. Yeah. By the way, it's another way that we say the F word instead of actually saying right Fuck. We'll just say F it to make it, less strong, more family friendly. So there's a million ways that we have to use that word without actually fully saying it. But very nice, yes. F it, I'm going to say it. I have some kind of number dyslexia. Oh my god. Okay. That's very interesting, and I'll tell you why. Not totally, which means I have to think of each number individually to make sense out of it. I experience this in my native language, yet not as painfully as in English. Would you have anything to say about it, or am I doomed? I do have something to say about it. I don't know if you're doomed. I can't. I probably can't be the judge of that, but gotta take care of my voice, guys. Every time I finish these, my voice is just like dead. Okay. So I say, oh my God, and that's very interesting for two reasons. Number one, I too also have a very, very minor case of number dyslexia. Very minor. It doesn't happen to me very frequently, but it can happen. And I know exactly what you mean. I actually more commonly experience what I call, I don't know if it's an actual thing, but it's what I call auditory dyslexia. And it doesn't usually cause a problem with my understanding. My brain will still understand things properly, like 99% of the time. But what I've noticed is sometimes when I'm listening to something, especially if like they say something and they've been talking, and then there's like a pause. In that pause, the final words will be echoing in my head, and sometimes I'll notice I'll be like my brain will say the last two words flipped, like in the other order, like instead of this way, they're said that in that order, and it doesn't make sense. That's the reason why I notice it sometimes because I'm like, that's not how we speak, and I go back and I listen to it, and they said it the proper way, but my brain flipped the last two words. It's really weird. I don't know why it happens. I've also experienced that in Spanish. So um, brains are weird. Brains are weird. We're all a little bit different. Can you train your way out of that? Probably. You can probably do things to minimize it. I'm sure. But at the end of the day, it might just be how your brain is. Like I have no idea how I would train away my auditory dyslexia. Um, Actually, I don't know how you would train away regular dyslexia either. That's not my field. Technically, I'm in a related field, but I really wouldn't know. That sounds more like neuroscience, and actually looking at the brain itself instead of just scientific research and stuff. Anyway, whatever. You know what I mean. So I wouldn't say you're doomed. It's unfortunate. It makes things more difficult. There are people with like regular dyslexia, like they have full blown like reading normal dyslexia, and they're perfectly successful. It's just they have trouble reading. So it might just be something you have to live with, unfortunately. Yeah. So it's very interesting though. Very interesting. So despondency. I took your tips on shadowing. Good. Just doing as much as I feel like. Okay. Sometimes even skip the day. Uh-huh. Usually around 30 minutes. Very nice. Helps a lot and stopped actually hitting it. Magical. Magical. Good. Glad to hear it. Still got a lot to work on. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Now everybody's case is a little bit different, but at the end of the day, there's no one perfect way. You gotta make sure you don't hate it, right? That's that's probably the one goal, that minimize the hate, maximize the like, because if you don't hate it, then you're likely to do it even if you don't necessarily feel like it. But if you maximize the like, then you're going to want to do it, regardless. And so any way that you can sort of tweak that ratio is going to help you in the long run. Very nice, very nice. And I see we have some other stuff here. So I'm gonna come back really quick. I'm gonna skip over a couple things. Trying to find other techniques to help myself. I appreciate your tuts. Yeah, tuts is a informal reduction for tutorials and vids uploaded lately. That's a lot of work. Usually don't have much to say apart from the accent shadowing. Yeah, that's no problem. You don't have to comment. The comments, of course, help the algorithm a bit, but really it's the watch time. Like the watch time is the single most important thing. It doesn't even matter my number of subscribers. Like it's watch time, because that's how YouTube makes money, right? The longer people watch, the more ads they can serve, the more they can make money. So if you don't have much to say, You don't have to say like, oh, I'm going to try to make a comment. Just like watch all the way to the end of the video, and that's going to do so much more than commenting. But of course, comment if you want. Like that also helps as well. And of course, I can respond to you. But okay, so I'm going to go back to Meadow here, Meadowzaki. When you said part and counterpart, I did not hear the P in part clearly. Interesting, because they teach us that we have to blow air strongly to get that sound, but sometimes I feel it is soft, other times it's like, okay, do we pronounce the P in the same way regardless of its position in the word, like sports spend Europe help? Okay, no, good question. Very good question, Meadow. So I actually talked about this, at least I talked about well, I don't know how I want to phrase that. I'm going to come back to that because we're going to be talking about that. But I basically talked about this in the lessons for the stop sounds, right? So there's the put but lesson. That was the first stop consonant stop sound lesson. The k g, and then the D lesson and the T lesson was the last one. And I'm still going to be talking more about the stops, especially the T sound. There's a lot more to say about the T sound. Don't worry, I can only make so many videos at once. But when it comes to the placement of the stop sound, this is one point where the rules generally match the reality, okay? But of course, we know reality is a little messy. So you say, right, they teach us that we have to blow air strongly to get that sound, right? Because it's at the start of a word, or what's at the start of a syllable, part, right? Now, here's the rule, okay? For the stop sounds, this doesn't really matter so much for non-stop sounds like S or Z or whatever. That's a little bit more free-flowing. You do want to be able to make a nice, clear sound regardless of what sound it is. And some sounds like the V, you really want to make sure that you can do really well because that's a common problem for a lot of learners. And you want to make sure you're actually saying a V sound or a TH sound or W sound. It's a common cluster that's a problem. And you're not, accidentally saying one of the wrong sounds. But that aside, like let's say we say P, okay? The rule for the stop sounds is if it's at the start of a stressed syllable. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's the start of a word or the start of a syllable in the middle of a word. As long as that syllable is stressed, it's supposed to be strong. Okay, so we get a strong P, a strong K, a strong B, a strong G, the G sound G, and then a strong D, strong T. Okay, so if I say pick, okay, that's supposed to be a nice strong P. Pick, pick, pick. And if I nice and clearly enunciate that, you're going to hear a nice strong P. Pick. Now, if I say part, okay, part, that's part of it. That's part of it. Okay, nice and strong. Now, if it's at the start of an unstressed syllable, again, it could be at the start of a word or in the middle of a word, but if it's at the start of an unstressed syllable, it's going to be a weak or softer P. Or if it's a K or a G or whatever it is, it all applies to all the 6 stop sounds. So if I say, I don't know, what's a word with P in the middle? Happy, right? Happy. Now, again, there's 2 P's here in the spelling. That does not matter at all. It's just spelling, okay? You might hear a little tiny bit of a held stop here, and that's okay. It's not really supposed to be there, but the point is it's a soft P, okay? Happy, P, P, P. It's not happy. That's not right, okay? It's too much air. Happy. So you have a tiny little bit of air, but it's just enough for us to kind of be able to hear that release of the lips. P, 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 instead of P, 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 okay? With the strong one, we want to hear that force of air, unless it's voiced like B, 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 B. Then it's just going to sound a little louder than B, 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 okay? The voiced ones, it's harder to hear the difference between, but for the voiceless P, T, and K, you really need to make that difference in the sound of the air, okay? Now, if one of these stop sounds, again, we'll say P, is at the end of a word, like the word stop, okay? there's nothing that it connects to, okay? Because if I say stop and it, that P is going to connect, it's going to activate, okay? It's going to be a soft P, it's going to be a weak P. That's the rule for that. But if it's just at the end, like say, if I say, no, stop, okay, that's it. Like there's nothing after it, or whatever is after it wouldn't connect. Like if I say, stop that, okay? The full enunciated word is with P, not a strong P, but just a P, right? Stop, stop, stop. And you hear, okay? That's the fully enunciated word. However, much more commonly, if there's nothing that it connects to, it's going to be a stop P, which is, that could be a held stop or a glottal stop. There's technically not much of a difference. I'm going to make a whole lesson, especially about the T, of the difference between held T and stop T, the glottal stop T. There are two ways to stop it, okay? It doesn't matter. That aside, when you say stop, okay, you go into the position for P, and you cut off the air here, or you at least just don't let anything come through your nose. Stop, stop, stop. And because that's the end position, or if I say stop that, I don't have to push out that P at the end for us to interpret it as a P, because I was in the end position of P before I went to the next sound. Okay, and I know that sounds like a lot. This is how the stop sounds work, okay? Start of a stressed syllable, strong. Start of a weak or unstressed syllable, not weak syllable, start of an unstressed syllable, it's a weak sound, okay? Just a little bit of air. And then at the end of a word, if there's no connection or blending or anything after it, for it to, do something different, it's going to be a stop sound, okay? That's one reason why I call them stops. In English, we will actually cut off in the air or just hold it for a second. Now, in this particular case, we have counterpart. Now, this is a special case, okay? We're still going to apply the same basic rules, but there's a little extra detail here, okay? As I mentioned briefly, the stress pattern, okay? We have two stressed syllables in this word. Now, in English, whenever a word has two stressed syllables, one of those syllables has to be the primary stress. So whichever one it is has to be higher, has to be a little bit louder. So is the unstressed syllable. That's going to be really low, really quiet, really small, okay? We have count and we have part. Now, by themselves, right, counter, the stressed syllable is count, that's going to be nice and loud, and the or ter is going to be small. Part by itself is going to be really loud. It's a stressed syllable. You put them together, the primary stress in this particular word is on cow, not on part. And so we don't want that P to necessarily be super, super strong, but we also don't want it to be super, super weak because it is stressed. It's just not as stressed. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sort of like maybe a medium strength P. Okay, this is a special case. Counterpart, counterpart. So you don't hear part with the air, but it's not counterpart, part. See, that's like no air. That's a weak P. It's sort of in the middle, just a little bit of air, which goes with the stress. You just don't stress it as much as normal. Okay. And I know that seems complicated, but it's not as complicated as it seems. It's a lot of information. So I hope that helps. There are special cases as well, like in sport, where the S is going to maybe slightly affect the strength of the P, but it is still supposed to be more of a stronger P there. So it can weaken the sound. But in general, those are special cases. Okay. I don't remember where I was. Okay. Is there a difference between, so Steve asks, is there a difference between what's about and how about? What's about? About. I don't think what's about is right. I mean, if you're asking like what is about blah blah blah. Like if I say, "Oh, I'm thinking," well, that doesn't work either because then you wouldn't say about. Anyway, technically, you could theoretically find them together, but I don't think what's about is a correct thing that we say. What's it about? Maybe. If you could think of an example, like actual sentences, that would help. Um, but otherwise, I would just say how about is correct and what's about is not. um, I think there is, but I don't know what it is, Steve. How about sounds like a suggestion, and what's about like a clarification specific thing you're talking. Yeah, okay, we'll come back to that after clarification. David, can you explain the difference between what does he or she look like and what how does he or she look like? Okay, so similar question, related question here. Okay. Similar answer, but in a different way. This is you guys are just full of like uber awesome questions here. Yes, the English language has borrowed the German word Uber to mean like a lot. So really, really great questions. It's correct to say, what does he or she look like? It is incorrect to say, how does he or she look like? But it's correct to say, how does he or she look? With no like. This is one of the single biggest mistakes that I hear almost every non-native English speaker make. I hear it all the time, okay? If I'm watching YouTube and I'm listening to somebody who is clearly not a native English speaker, it's almost guaranteed that they're going to say, how does he look like? Okay. Now, at the end of the day, it's a very small mistake. It doesn't really affect your communication. It's not a big deal, but it doesn't sound natural. Okay. Now, I actually have an assumption, which is that because English is sort of becoming a global language, unless Mandarin takes over at some point, um, and there are actually more non-native speakers than native speakers at this point, that is actually going to become proper grammar, like in 500 years. It's just going to be how people speak. Because I don't think that there's a way to stop the momentum and to fix that mistake in enough people in the world. Like I can only help so many people. And again, it's such a small point. This could be one of those things that start changing, you know. And it's interesting that regardless of your native language, I hear so many non-native speakers make this exact same mistake. Um, I'm not sure why. So what can go with like, right? And it makes sense. What is a thing? Okay, if I say what does he look like or what does she look like, there's a thing, the what, and like is similar. Okay, so what does he look like compared to that thing? Like compared to what, right? Where we say how, there's no like. Because if I say how does he look or how does she look, I'm just asking like how, like in what way does the person look, not compared to something. If you want to compare it, you're going to say compared to what, not compared to how, right? So that's why what does he or she look like is correct, and how does he or she look like is incorrect. Um, but again, it's not the biggest point in the world. I would encourage you to fix that. If you make that mistake, you'll sound more natural. But unless you're a very advanced speaker already, talking not just to David here, but to everybody, unless you're already a very advanced speaker, you probably have bigger points to fix. So, it's not the biggest thing to worry about. Okay, now where was I? Yeah, once I get lost in the comments, we know that I'm too far behind. Okay, I believe how does she look like is wrong. Oh, very good. See, unknown knows. Unknown knows the things. I don't know. Interesting. So despondency is making some mistakes here. And I know despondency is quite advanced. So Steve said despondency thanks for helping. That is correct. There should be a comma after despondency. If you say thanks for help, that does not work. You can say thanks for the help as a noun. That's fine. Thanks for your help, but not thanks for help. That is incorrect. So Steve is correct. Thanks for helping. Yes. Um, Meadow, do we pronounce the P? Oh, yeah, that was the same thing. I already answered that question. Okay, good. Despondency, following up on that, sport and spend sound the same in terms of P, but Europe and help would have a stop P, exactly. The P at a beginning of a word is a different one too. Oh, okay, yeah. But all four words might have the same one in that case. Not sure what that means. Oh, those four words, sport, spend, Europe, help. I'm not sure what you mean in that case. Anyway, yeah, so unknown, like there's no way of me understanding. Okay, so back to this. There's no way of me understanding a 4, 5, 6 digit number. And if I'm so determined to watch or understand the video, I have to keep stopping the video and I no longer enjoy it anymore. Interesting. Um, yeah, that could be a problem. uh, yeah, that definitely sounds like a brain thing. It is what it is. So I take it you're probably not all that great with math. I'm not. Well, I hesitate to say I'm not great with math. I definitely have never really liked math, but I did have one math teacher who was able to successfully not only teach me math, but make me like math. Only teacher in the world to ever accomplish that. But aside from that, um, just stopping the video. I don't want to do it anymore. Yeah, I don't know. Although I'm not sure. Maybe this is something related to something already said, and I just forgot it. But so you say there's no way of you understanding a 4, 5, or 6 digit number, and then we're talking about watching or understanding a video. I'm not sure how those two are related. I'm sure there's a reason, and I'm just not noticing it, and it's so obvious, but I'm not seeing the connection there. So fill me in on that. I have a minor number dyslexia too. I just can't stress enough how much I hate numbers. Well, yeah, I know, right? Um, Numbers are the language of nature, supposedly. Um, I actually have people who love math and the hard sciences would hate me for saying it, but um, I have a theory that some of what we think is objective is actually subjective. Um, Not that it's necessarily wrong. It's a complicated topic. It has to do with the nature of reality. We won't talk about that because that's not what we're here for. David, after some retracted messages, says, so this is funny. I've actually suffered from really bad. See, this is the problem with English. When we run into a word like this that we've never seen, I'm not sure how to say it. Dis Dyscalculia, or maybe it's dyscalculia because the C could be an S sound, could be a S or a K. See, I don't know. I'd have to hear it. I'm gonna say dyscalculia because it sounds like calculate, so I'm gonna say it that way. Okay, number dyslexia. Yes, that makes sense. So it's probably a K there. See, I have to deduce because of English. I'm a native speaker. This happens. So you got to focus on your ears. Since I was a kid, never understood how to read maps, analog clock measurements, and unit conversion. Interesting. I've actually found English to help me with many of the symptoms because I find the English way of telling time easier. Very interesting. Very interesting. So now we're touching a bit on the connection between how language affects perception. And in this case, it's not just having sort of a minor subjective, okay, yeah, in this language, bridge is masculine and that language, bridge is feminine. And so a native speaker is more likely to describe it as feminine or masculine, respectively. But which that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Here, it's actually having a real world impact on your ability to comprehend numbers. And by extension, read maps and clocks and measurements. Um, that's very, very interesting. I'm sure there are many linguists who would like to talk to you about that. I am not one, so I don't know. And I can't put you in touch with one because I don't know any. But that is very, very fascinating and makes perfect sense to me. They're the same in both languages to me, but worse in English. Interesting. So worse in English. There could be various reasons for that, just because it's not your native language, but could be having a reverse effect compared to Davin's issue. It's just so sad. I want to cry every time I hear a number related thing. Yeah. Well, to be fair, numbers in your native language, I mean basic numbers, like just 1,592,000. Sorry if that made you cry. Sorry. But large numbers by themselves, not calculated computations or calculations. For most people, it's not that hard, but in other languages, when you learn other languages, numbers are usually one of the very big painful points. For even just saying a really large number can be very, very difficult in a new language, because it's sometimes things shift. Like in Japanese, they actually, instead of counting every 3 zeros, they count every 4 zeros when they make their shift, and that just ruins my entire perception of numbers. And I'm not going to say I can't count in Japanese. It's just I know I'm going to need a whole lot of extra practice compared to, say, Spanish, to be able to just like spit out a number like a high number in Japanese. Even just basic numbers, like I because how they do it, it makes sense, but I don't know. It takes me a little second longer. Anyway, David knows what I'm talking about. Can you imagine hearing someone say 1996 and you have to think like 19, so that's 1 and 9, and we have 90 and 6 at the end, so that must see that. Although I don't have that problem, that sounds very familiar to me. I don't do that with numbers, but I think I do that with something else. Oh, I do that when I add, or not just add. I do that when I'm doing calculations in my head, which I usually just use a calculator, but that's kind of how I add. Like if I have to add, say, like 56 and 73 or something, I'll do like, okay, so 6 and 3 is 9, and then 5 and 7 is 12, and so we get 129. Should be right. I have to like break it down into pieces, unless it's like very, very simple, like 4 plus 10 is 14. Okay. So that's usually how I do it. I'll find a proxy to sort of balance out either line them up or balance out the values. Like I'll take a 6 from here and put it into here to make this an even number, and then I'll add those two numbers. So yeah. I don't remember how many times I said I'm 16 while I was 18. That can happen too. Yeah. Well, me, once I turned 18, I know this isn't the same problem. It's actually not a problem. Once I turned 18, I stopped caring about my age because I just wanted to hit 18 and be able to like be an adult and do what I wanted to do. So I'm constantly forgetting my actual age. Um, in fact, now that I am 31, yes, I'm turning 32 this year. I have to keep reminding myself of that. See, I don't even have it off the top of my head. I'm like, I'm 30 something. I know that. So anyway, I'm old. um, David, to unknown, I can totally relate, and it's even worse when natives say the abbreviated way of saying years, like 1900s. I literally get a brain freeze as I'm figuring out in my mind. Yeah, I get that when I'm just listening to numbers in another language. So that's to me, that's for me, that's just a language thing. But do you also struggle when natives spell out words in conversation? I know that's not really connected with numbers. Yeah, comes with practice. Yeah. Most things will come with practice, so that's good. But Josh, so when you're asking if somebody is well, healthy, would you use what or how? And if you're just wondering about someone's physical appearance, would you use what or how? Very good question. Very, very good question. Yeah, so if I'm asking, if I want to know if someone is well, if they're healthy or not, or how they're feeling, how they're feeling, I say, "How are you? How? What is the state?" Now, another way to say it, a roundabout way, what is the state you are in? What is the emotion you're feeling? Right? If we're going to talk about it that way, we switch to what. But when we say, "How are you?" or "How are you feeling?" "How are you doing?" Right? How is like the way, right? So what is your current state? How are your emotions flowing right now? You can think of several different ways to think about it, but it's the how. It's the in what way is it moving? Okay. Or in what way are you feeling? That's sort of like a different way to say it. I know it's because now I'm saying what, it might be confusing, but whatever. I hope that's not confusing. It's something that I feel, but I haven't formalized how to actually like explain this point, and so I feel it, and I'm still trying to stumble over my explanation, but hopefully that makes sense. When we're asking about someone's appearance, that goes back to the original question. If I want to know how someone looks in comparison to something else, well, actually, those are two slightly different questions. Oh, there's so many subtleties here. Okay. If I want to know a comparison, okay, and actually, first, if I don't want to know a comparison, okay, I would say how. Okay, how does he look? Right? It's the same thing. How does he feel? In what way is he looking? Right? Not looking, but like his appearance. Right? Um, it's weird. It really is weird when you think about it. But if we have some sort of comparison, okay, now there's two things here. So I can say, what does he look like? Okay, so I'm saying compared to what? Like, what is his appearance similar to? That's another way to say it. What is his appearance similar to? So what does he look like? Okay. Um, Now I could say, how does he look? Not with a like, but how does he look? Or how does she look? Or how does it look? How do they look? Whatever. And depending on the context, that could have a couple slightly different meanings. Meaning, like, say, I don't know, like I put on a suit. I say, oh, how do I look? Like good, bad. Should I change? What? Um, or if it's usually it's kind of like a good, just like how do you feel, right? Do you feel good? Do you feel bad? Um, how does she look? How does she look? How would that be a comparison? See, I lost my thought there. No. Yeah, I lost my thought there. I forgot that train of thought. Okay, anyway, just don't worry about it. That's the basics. Notice I just said that's the basics. Wait, that's the basics. Yeah, I should have said those are the basics. See, that's another part of the change. Instead of there's people, right? Instead of there are people. It's also affecting other parts of the language. That's the basics instead of those are the basics. But anyway, things. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's useful. It probably wasn't, but that's the best I have right now. um, I meant numbers on the video. Oh, I see. So if there's like in the course of the video, if somebody says numbers or there's like numbers shown or whatever, it causes you to have to pause the video and try to process it. Um, Interesting. By the way, I think you should take it easy on yourself and cut yourself some slack. Yes, there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I have this and that. I have this and that thing." Yeah. So please understand. And if I ask you to repeat yourself a couple times, it's because of that. Even natives struggle with dyscalculia. Some of them. Dyscalculia. Very nice. Yes. Um, Although instead of YOO, I would put YU as ooh sound. Um, that would be, and then the A would have an H after it, and the I would have an H after it. I know what you mean, but if you're trying to write it the way I write it, then that's how I would write it. But anyway, whatever. Yes, and I concur. I agree with that. Like it sucks. It's frustrating. Yes, it makes your life more difficult. But it is what it is. If you can find a way to reduce that, or maybe somehow somehow fix it, um, then okay. If not, and you have to live with it, then maybe you can find ways to cope with it. But definitely don't put yourself down, or anything like that. Just like, yeah, okay, it sucks. Um, like me, I mentioned a couple months ago. At this point, I don't even remember how long ago that was. Several months ago, that I might have ADHD. and not be diagnosed. So since I'm still not diagnosed, I still don't know, but I'm pretty sure. And I have focus issues and some memory issues, and you know, it sucks when you have to, keep running from room to room because, you by the time you get into the room that you were going to go to get something, you forget what it was and you get something else. So you're like, oh, I need that. And then you go back into the other room and then you're like, wait, I needed that other thing. That's why I went in the room in the first place. So you go back into the room and then maybe you even forgot it again. That's frustrating. um, and maybe I'm just super absent-minded. I don't know, but it is what it is. You just gotta compensate if you can. Otherwise, just go with it. David, what I hate about Japanese are all the different counter words. Yeah, I know what you mean. I know you can get by if you just say hitots, futats, etc., but I still get corrected by natives to ichimai, nimai when buying stamps. Yeah, I know. They're such a helpful people. Hitots, futats, ichimai, nimai. I just imagine it's like I'm seeing it like an anime in my head. But which, by the way, I found a new anime and I'm like, oh my god, it's so good. So if anybody wants to talk about that, we can talk about that too. I know it's not English, but yeah, counters. Again, talking about things that take people, a while to acquire in languages. In Japanese, I would think that counters would be one of those things because counters are a nightmare, absolute nightmare. It's like it's like, what do you mean you change the word based on the type of item? There's like literally like a million ways to count in Japanese depending on what you're counting. It's ridiculous. And it is what it is. Japanese is an amazing language. It's fantastic. But why you gotta be so complicated? Like, I mean, I get that, okay, yeah, word order can be very different in languages. That's fine. It's basically backwards compared to English. That's okay. Fine, whatever. That's part of the appeal. It's cool. It's interesting. But I want to just say the one thing and the two thing and the three thing, not, it's like you can't even count. You literally cannot count. Like if you're holding a pencil and you don't know the counter for long flat objects or long round objects, I don't even remember, whatever. You literally cannot count them. Again, you can get by with hitotsu, futatsu, whatever, but you can't count them properly. And it's ridiculous. Anyway, Josh, you need to make a video on all these changes in American English that people from other side of the pond would label incorrect grammar. Well, that would be difficult. I'd have to do a lot of research on that. The one thing that one of the few things that I'm very, very aware of is, again, British English tends to use the perfect tenses properly, and American English doesn't. We like the simple past when possible. But, I mean, all of the things that have changed from British English to American English, I mean, that would basically just be a comparison between British English and American English. And, Brits would just say wrong, 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 wrong. So that's all I'd really be doing. But the perfect tense problem is a particular issue because that's not something that's just like, oh, we have a different word, or whatever it is. It's a very subtle thing. There's actually, I've categorized it into three parts where there's the present perfect that we have to use in both British and American English because it means something different than the simple past, and you have to use the perfect tense in that case. Usually the present perfect. Americans don't tend to use the past perfect very much unless we need it to clarify. But then there's the category where on the opposite end, right? So it's like American, British, both use present perfect because we have to. The opposite end would be where a British person would use present perfect, but it sounds very British to Americans, and we would probably never say it that way. Like, I've just come from the store. maybe an American would say that, but I would find it very surprising. We would say, I just came from the store. Um, and so where it will either sound wrong to an American or it'll just sound really British. And then there's the middle case where Americans might use the present perfect. It could come out that way because it's technically correct to be the present perfect. But we tend to use the simple past because the meaning, the difference in meaning between the present perfect and the simple past in most cases is so small that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, and it doesn't really change anything. And so in those cases, an American might use the present perfect. It happens. It's relatively common. It's not a big deal. But it's more likely that we're going to use the simple past. So there's three categories between British and American English of how the present perfect is used. And I'm going to be making a lesson on that, probably several lessons on that in the future. But I'm so much focused on pronunciation and trying to get some of the preposition videos done. It'll come. It'll come. I think I might have it too. So Gabriel, talking about, I guess, dyscalculia. Although I'm sure the stress, I'm probably stressing that so hard, so wrong. It's probably instead of dyscalculia, it's probably like dyscalculia. Dyscalculia. That sounds a bit better for some reason. Anyway, I think I might have it too. I don't want to go to the doctor right now because of COVID. Yeah. Oh my god, I thought this happened only to me, Josh. Wait, now I don't remember what we were talking about. I think I was giving an example. I don't remember because we've talked about numbers in a couple different ways now, and I assume it's about the numbers. What is it? Completely lost that thread of the conversation. And I caught up. Yay! Achievement. Oh, ADHD. Oh yeah, that part. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I had heard about ADHD before. And like most people stereotypically think, it's perceived as a hyperactive young children's, disorder. But there are actually an insanely large number of adults that are not diagnosed or were diagnosed as adults. And I stumbled upon, oh, you're talking about ADHD also. Yeah, okay. And I stumbled upon, maybe you were there, I don't remember, but this is like back in, I think, September of last year, November or something. But I stumbled upon a video from How to ADHD, which is a whole channel about ADHD. It's a really awesome channel. But I didn't find it because I was looking for ADHD. I found it because I was looking for ways to schedule because I've always had difficulty scheduling things. Like even now, when I'm trying to run an eBay business, the English hacks, still teaching English actively, so technically that's three separate businesses. And of course, my other things, working out, doing whatever. I believe it or not, I don't have a solid schedule. I do not, and I don't know how I'm managing to get things done. But somehow I am because I've always managed to manage in the past. But schedules make me feel trapped, right? I know they don't. They give you freedom, but they make me feel trapped. And so I was, looking for the millionth time on more ideas on how to schedule. And I stumbled upon that video, and it was a 3-part series of how people with ADHD can perceive the calendar, scheduling, and actually go about, successfully making a schedule. And at first I was like, well, I don't have ADHD, so but I've watched so many other videos and resources, and nothing has seemed to help. So let me watch this. Maybe this will help me. And by the time I got halfway through the second video in the 3-part series, I was like, this sounds like me, because they were giving all these different examples of like, oh, people with ADHD experience this and this and this and this and this. I was just like, this sounds exactly like me. And by the end of the third video, I was just like, I'm pretty sure I have ADHD. And so I just started watching all these videos, doing all this research on ADHD, and I have not been formally diagnosed. But I feel pretty certain because it also explains my entire life and why I have part of the reason why I have so many interests and have never been able to really focus on any one thing and, progress super far with anything. So you've taught me a lot, Josh. Oh, well, you're welcome. Glad to help. You think I've taught you a lot now? Wait till I start my next channel, which I will be starting in the relatively near future. That is going to be about essentially, it's going to be about me, but more broadly, it's going to be about how to be a polymath, using my own journey as the example. Anyway, there are other reasons why I think I have ADHD and this and that, whatever, blah, 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 it doesn't matter. Okay, so do you say cuppa? Do you say cup of, or tea or coffee, or just cup of tea? Yeah, so obviously, cup of tea is a very, very common collocation, because we actually say like, oh, it's not my cup of tea, meaning like I don't really like it. It's not, I'm not really interested in it. But yeah, that is a common. So this is two common rules being combined. Of, we know very commonly we drop that V sound, spelled with an F, but it's a V sound. We don't always do it, but more often than not we do. And then the P, right? Consonants connect to vowels. That's the number one general rule of English. That is the most common rule in the whole language for connections or linking. And so we get ka, pa, drop the V, cup of tea, cup of coffee. I'm gonna go make a cup of coffee. Cup of coffee, very, very common. Cup of water. Of course, we probably use glass of water more. It doesn't really matter. Glass of water, but the same thing. Glass of water, cup of water. Yeah, it's just a very common linking in the language. It's not anything special. What about the past perfect? Good question. Say you're talking to someone and remembering an action that was completed before another one began in the past. I think I had just come from the store, cooked dinner, watched TV, and then I heard the phone ring. Yeah, so basically, as I very briefly mentioned, Americans, so there's nothing that says we can't use the past perfect when it's supposed to be used, right? And sometimes we do. Sometimes it'll happen to come out that way. However, I don't think, unless there is some potential detail in the context that is a little bit unclear, I don't think that there is any case in which we have to use the past perfect. It does have its grammatical use, right? It exists for a reason. But right, if I say, for example, right, very clear context. Let's say that so I come home, right? You and I live together, whatever. I come home, and then I don't know. I cook dinner, and then you arrive home. Okay, so I say I had cooked dinner before you got here. Well, technically that's grammatically correct, right? I cooked dinner, you got here. This one happened first, so I had cooked dinner before you got here. But what's the difference in meaning if I say I cooked dinner before you got here? Nothing. There's no difference in meaning. The grammatical structure is different, right? And the grammatical structure of the past perfect implies, like, it makes it very, very obviously clear that this one happened first, right? But in this context, the context is clear enough, and there's no difference in meaning. So the only time, I don't want to say the only time, again, it might just happen, we might happen to just use it. It's okay. But generally speaking, the only time we use the past perfect, because there's not really any difference in meaning from the simple past if the context is clear, the only time we really use it is if the context is not clear. And what we tend to do, I've noticed this in myself, what we tend to do is we'll be talking, describing a story, whatever. And in the moment, we'll realize, oh, wait, if I don't use the past perfect here, it's not going to be clear what's going on. And so we'll dynamically, on the fly, just switch to the past perfect right before we need to say it. It's like the brain just makes this quick switch in the flow. But that is like compared to all of the times that we could use the present or the past perfect, that happens pretty rarely. Okay. So again, we do use it. It does come out. It's not wrong, but statistically, it's much more common, I think, in my experience, in what I've noticed, um, to just use the simple past because there's not much difference in meaning. Um, so yeah, in your example specifically, I think I'd just come from the store, cooked dinner, watched TV, and then I heard the phone ring. Now, actually, in this case, we actually say had, but we're dropping it in all but the first cases. I think I had just come from the store, had cooked dinner, had watched TV, and then that last action, right? And then I heard the phone ringing. Okay, that's going to be simple past. I heard the phone ringing. Um, but we'd probably just say, especially because we're already dropping had in the following, three actions or two actions, cook dinner and watch TV, because it's implied. We don't have to repeat it. So particularly because we're dropping it there already, right? I think I just came from the store. Now, does that work? Okay. Let's see. I think I just came from the store, cooked dinner, watched TV, and then I heard the phone ringing. No problem. No problem. Now, in this case, because this is sort of a longer sentence and we do have a series of actions, it might be a little more likely in this particular case that we would use the past perfect. But if I just spit out the simple past, especially if I keep the word just, um, it doesn't sound wrong. It sounds perfectly fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it at all. So yeah, the past perfect is usually optional. Usually optional. That would be the easy um, point here to take away. Unknown, I actually meant the words. Some seem to be saying cuppa to mean cup of tea without saying the tea. Interesting. Okay. Oh, I see. Do you say cuppa to say cup of tea or coffee or just cup of... Okay, yeah. See, especially since we're usually talking about pronunciation, I assumed that like cuppa was talking about in cup of tea. Um, so okay, yeah. So would I drop the tea? That would be like in the phrase cup of tea or cup of coffee. Would you, just say cuppa? Would you drop the tea or drop the coffee? No, never, never, ever, ever. Because number one, if the context is clear of what I'm talking about, then I wouldn't say of. So there would be no like, oh, like do you want some tea? Yeah, I'll take a cup. Okay, there's no reason to say cuppa because there's nothing after it. Now if I say, oh yeah, I'll take a cup of tea. There you go, we have the tea. Um, and if it's not clear of what we're talking about, tea, coffee, water, whatever, like, oh, uh, could I get a cup of, could I get a cup of what? Right? So, no, you need the thing after it. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Like as soon as I get home, I'm going to have a nice hot cuppa. Yeah, my brain is like cup of what? Cup of what? You can say a nice hot cup, having in mind tea or whatever it is, and that's fine if that's implied in the context. But if you just say, I'm going to have a nice hot cuppa, see, I mean, even my intonation, it's not dropping. Nice hot cuppa something. Yeah. How do you feel about natives that shorten certain adjectives, like saying something was delish, delicious, or something was totes emotion? How do I feel about it? Well, it doesn't really matter how I feel about it because it is what it is. Language is dynamic. Um, there are some things that natives do that I don't like. I find annoying. Um, This sounds funny now. Oh my God. Yeah, I know, right? um, but I understand, which is really funny because usually English teachers are the ones who tend to be more of like the grammar Nazis, where they're like, "Oh no, that's wrong. You can't do that. Oh, it's delicious, not delish. What are you doing?" Like, where I'm just like, yeah, there's some things that annoy me, but language is language. It's dynamic, and especially if you're a native, like you can use the language however you want as long as somebody understands you. So, um, uh, there are probably some reductions like that. Like, see, I don't use delish. Uh, Totes is something that we use in a mocking way. I guess mocking is a bit strong. um, but my roommate really uses it a lot. Like if he wants to sarcastically say like, "Oh yeah, sure," or "Oh, yeah, that's good," or whatever, he'll just say totes, totes. But he's being sarcastic. Um, like I never use it in a serious way. Nobody I know uses it in a serious way. But it's a way to speak. Um, Emotion is one that I don't think I've ever even heard. So clearly I'm not in the loop here. But yeah, I'm trying to think of maybe some that I use because I'm sure that I shorten some adjectives. I think I probably usually do that in informal writing more than anything. But I don't know. And I mean I don't do like delish or totes or whatever unless I'm being um, sarcastic maybe, but there's probably some. By the way, when I heard you read Totes and Moshe out loud, I learned because of how I said it. Well, because I just imagine like when we hear things like this. I mean, I guess I can't speak for all natives, but my impression and what I assume the average American native speaker's impression would be is we imagine either a valley girl or for some reason in my mind at least an emo girl. I don't know why emo. This doesn't seem to match up, but definitely a valley girl. Like oh, I was totes emotion. Like OMG, I was totes emotion. After that delish dinner, it's just like whatever. Um, but people speak how they speak. There's nothing wrong with it. It just might be kind of annoying to some people. That's okay. I enjoy using gel a lot. Oh, so gel because at first I was like gel what? I think usually the normal reduction is jelly. Gel makes sense. We should say gel. I've never heard gel. I'm gel. Yeah, like I'm jelly. We would say jelly. But there probably are some people who use gel. Like if you heard that from a native, it's fine. It's just a different variation. I heard on South Park. Yeah. Well, if it was on South Park, it could have been part of either a pun or they're just like really making fun of this type of like reductionist language. Um, so it might not be something that people actually use if it's on South Park. Um, so keep that in mind. But it might be. I don't know. Um, I looked it up actually, and it's a thing. Okay, well there you go. Then use it as you will. Gabriel emo. I was thinking about the Kardashians. For these reductions. Yeah, Kardashians kind of fit the Valley Girl type thing, but they're just rich. A lot of Valley Girl, like part of Valley Girl is like rich, but not all really rich. Like fashion women who are into fashion and stuff. Not all of them are Valley Girls necessarily. So yeah. Yeah, I don't know why in my mind emo is associated with some of these phrases. Um, it doesn't really seem to make any sense. So you could probably disregard that. That's probably just me. But suspicious. Yeah, suspicious. I know that's another one. Yeah. getting late over here, so I got a dash. Very nice word, dash, yes. Good night, everyone, and thank you for today's Q&A. Yeah, no problem. You're welcome. Yeah, it's been 2.5 hours, and it seems like we're kind of slowing down here, so I always got other things I could do, like work on videos or avoid working on videos. You know, because sometimes I don't feel like it. But yeah. Do we have any other questions or anything? It says we have 8 people here, so I'll give a couple minutes for new questions. But if we don't have anything, then I think we're good. Meanwhile, I'm going to take a drink of my lovely, delicious, unhealthy drink. Or should I say delish drink? Same here. Good night. Have a nice day. Yes, you too. Have a good night. Goodbye, goodbye. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you next time. As always bring your questions. I think we're done. We have 7 people, and it only seems like there's like 2 to 3 people in the chat. That's pretty normal. Okay, so then I think we'll end here at 2 hours and 40 minutes. So thank you all very much. We'll have another live next week. I'm pretty sure I might have some sort of appointment next week, but if so, we'll figure that out. But see you next week, and thank you very much.